list inflation as the most urgent issue now facing the U.S., while COVID actually sits now at number 3 behind immigration. So does this prove that it's time to roll back all the restrictions, maybe help those inflationary issues in doing so? Let's get reaction from Democrat strategist Kelly Hyman, and former Ted Cruz campaign pollster Chris Wilson. Chris, let me come to you first. Americans clearly have lost confidence in the president's ability to deal with inflation. You look at the Fox Business polls that we've had, 47% of Americans find his actions hurting the cause of inflation. Only 22% say he's helping. Biden's social spending plan, the BBB plan, would push inflation higher. 46% of Americans believe that. Only 21% believe, as the president do, that it would push inflation lower. How is it possible for the president to turn public opinion around as inflation just gets worse?
Oh, there's a lot rolled up in that. Is it possible for him to turn it around? I'll give you an important statistic, David. No incumbent president has ever seen his approval rating increase after January 31st of an off-year election. We're past January 31. He's in the mid-30s overall. He's actually even in a 60 approval rating with Democrats, which is just catastrophic. You know, Trump never dropped below 90 with Republicans. But his inflation is a real crisis for American families, and one that he seems completely unwilling to address. At this point, he's going out on the road, so even a secret plan to fight inflation is probably better than proving to be completely clueless and out of touch, running around the country touting the big spending bill that nobody believes did anything to solve inflation, and talking about, and it did nothing more than benefit a bunch of government contractors and special interests. He's not talking about the crushing burden that his spending is putting on everyday families, and it's creating a downward slide right now that I think you're going to see absolutely tank his presidency, and he's going to have no ability to get anything done over the next few months because his own party is running from him.
Kelly, as Chad Pergram is always pointing out, it's all about the math in Congress, and the math just isn't there for the president, because not only can he not get a single Republican vote in the Senate, but of course you have Senators Sinema and Senator Manchin who are standing firm against spending any more money right now. Senator Joe Manchin said, this was earlier in the week, he said, quote, "As inflation and our $30 trillion in national debt continue a historic climb, only in Washington, D.C. do people seem to think that spending trillions more of taxpayers' money will cure our problems, let alone inflation." He was speaking to the president.
Well, your point, the fact about inflation, we have to first understand where it comes from and who has the power about inflation. We have to remember that that comes under the federal power. And so it comes under the Federal Reserve has the power to tame inflation. And so I think that's key to remember that. It's not under the president, it's under the Federal Reserve to do that. But I would disagree about the polls. With every poll, there is a margin of error on any type of polls. And let's think about all the great things the president has done. We have the bipartisan infrastructure bill that has passed, the COVID relief bill that has passed, that are helping American people. And I think that's key. So I would totally disagree. The president has done a great job and will continue to do a great job for the American people.
We got to say, this is well beyond the margin of error. Twice as many people think the president's policies are hurting inflation rather than helping. But without, the main key is, without Senator Manchin's vote, this thing ain't going to get done.
No, it's not. And the fact is what President Biden has done so far has done nothing more in the eyes of the American people, which is talking from a public opinion standpoint, of increased inflation, increased prices, increased the cost of avocados, for crying out loud. I mean, our guacamole cost went way up for the Super Bowl. It was crushing. And it has affected everyone's life. The cost of gasoline, I could go on and on. We could do an entire segment where we just recite how much prices have increased. But when we get into what Biden has done in terms of giving money, you had Governor Stitt of Oklahoma who's doing an audit of the State Department of Education, because the amount of money that was wasted by bureaucrats and education bureaucrats in terms of not spending it where it was supposed to be is mind-blowing. And I think it'll be really, I encourage all 49 other governors to follow Governor Stitt's lead and start to audit where this COVID money actually went, because I think we'd be shocked to see how little of it actually ended up in the classroom with students. That's what the OMB is supposed to be doing. There's $800 billion that hasn't been spent yet. But Kelly, the president says now
now, he sort of doubled down yesterday saying that he could break up the BBB plan into little parts, and he pinpointed specifically the $555 billion in climate spending as a key area of agreement. How would that work? How would you break up BBB in bite form that maybe could be passed?
Well, I think that's a really good point. So you're talking about the Build Back Better plan that's going to help the American people. And so it could be parceled out in different ways to come together. I think it's important for different parties, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent, to come together and to separate the bill into different components as well and pass it that way to help people to make sure that people get free hearing aids, to make sure people help people with child care or taking care of their elderly family and help the American people. I think that's really important to do that. And I think Build Back Better does that. And I definitely think that that's a smart idea to pass it in different chunks.
Kelly, I just have to ask you said free hearing aids. Nothing is free in this world, you know. They're not free, and the cost comes in the form of inflation. Isn't that precisely the problem that we have now? Giving out things that are supposedly free that we end up paying for in inflation.
No, I would disagree with you. As I said before, we have to remember about inflation. And the key thing about inflation is that it is by the Federal Reserve contain that. And so they say that they're going to increase the interest rates.
You know why that is, Kelly? Because they print money to pay for the bonds that they buy from the Treasury, because they're spending money in Washington that we don't have. So the Federal Reserve buys up those Treasury bonds and prints money in order to buy it up, and that's where inflation comes from.
You say you want to talk about the money, and they always say it's the economy, stupid. Let's look at the economy and what Biden has done under the economy. Let's look at the unemployment rate is less than 4%. Let's look at the job rate, what is the lowest that it's been. That people it's the job rate is helping the American people since the 1960s. Unemployment is less than 4%, and we haven't had that in decades. Let's also not forget the fact that please don't interrupt me. If you could let me finish. The fact that the infrastructure bill, that the former president tried to get that passed, and he wasn't able to do that, and that Biden was able to get the infrastructure bill passed.
He did indeed.
I think that's key. I think it's important to give him credit where credit's due, and he deserves it.
Kelly, we're going to give you the last word because he did get infrastructure passed, but again, and I agree, it does largely come down to what the Fed does over the next year. We'll see what happens if they can cut inflation without causing a recession. It'll be quite a feat. We'll see if that happens. But we appreciate you both coming on. Kelly and Chris, thank you very much.